Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk about modern mobile app development. I'm Kovac, and I'm happy to see you here all online. I don't see you really, but I see there are really many of you here, and happy to talk with you about this really very current topic. So what will I talk about? I want to first tell you how mobile devices shape our lives and how they shape them now as well. I want to talk with you about the evolution of smartphones, how actually they came from being dumb phones to smartphones. Then I want to talk with you about mobile app development trends, which I see currently. And there's this one big one of hybrid app development and how this improved over the recent times. I want to then talk with you about the developer experience and how that is now in the focus of many software teams and of many tools which are developed. I want to talk with you about serverless, how that really revolutionized the way how front-end developers can now also build mobile apps themselves without having needing a backend developer as well. And about declarative programming, how that became a standard, about style system and the component architecture, which I see now being developed across different frameworks. Then I want to end the whole talk with a digression about technology agnosticism. All right. So who am I? I already got introduced before, but I just want to, in my own words, tell you a bit about myself. So I'm a freelance software engineer, and I have a big passion for building software for users and also participating at hackathons, where I already participated at over 20 of them all over the world. I am active in the developer community, especially in the community of React and React Native, where I sometimes speak at conferences or at meetups. And I also contribute to open source, and I'm an active member on Stack Overflow, where I answer questions. Right now, my main focus lies on science communication and on delivering tech workshops, that is for beginners or also in-house workshops for companies. And I'm working right now on a project which is still in stealth mode, but it's a program to help people stop snoring. So in case you're interested in workshops or in the upcoming mobile app to help you stop snoring, then please just hit me up with a direct message on Twitter. Like Kovac is my handle. And just when you put in my name into LinkedIn, you also quickly find me, and I'm happy to tell you more about it. We're also looking for beta testers there. All right, I want to make this interactive today because we cannot see each other. Usually when I'm on stage, I ask the audience a few questions when I give a talk. And this time I want to make it interactive with some tools we have here. So you can go to this link or just take out your phone and scan the QR code. You can, on your iPhone, you can just use your phone app, or you have a QR code app to scan it. And when you do so, it should look something like this. And you already got the first question here. And let's see. The question is, which words do you associate with a mobile app? And you can give up to 3 different answers there. And I see already like 5 people already joined. So please, 7 people now. So maybe I just quickly show you the QR code again. So just take out your phone. You probably, when you're looking at this here with a, you're probably looking at the whole thing from a smartphone, from a desktop computer. You can take out your smartphone and then look at the presentation. So what do you see? Okay, we see some answers coming in here. All right. Oh, I just see that actually what is streamed of myself on the Hopin platform is different than what I see on my slides right now. what I see. So we would see some more words coming in. Yes, exactly. That's now we see the right thing. So there are more words coming in step by step. Okay, that's just a small time gap between that. Okay, so we see a lot of different words associated with mobile apps. We see here developer, fast, easy to make things work, fluent, iOS, Android, native, social media, and there are more and more words coming in. Thank you for that. And so you see some also no memory, responsive, gaming. So some positive words, some negative words, different types of words. And I want to then see at the end of my talk how that might have changed. How which words do you might associate with terms of a mobile app after this talk? All right. So thank you for your replies. And we will also later have a small quiz as well. Good. Oops. Good. Let's talk about how mobile devices shaped our lives. I want to start with a quote from Nikola Tesla. And this quote is from 1926. When wireless is perfectly applied, the whole Earth will be converted into a huge brain, which in fact it is, all things being particles of a real and rhythmic whole. We shall be able to communicate with one another instantly, irrespective of distance. Not only this, but through television and telephony, we shall see and hear one another as perfectly as though we were face to face, despite intervening distances of thousands of miles. And the instruments through which we shall be able to do this will be amazingly simple compared with our present telephone. A man will be able to carry one in his vest pocket. So you see this amazing quote here. Nikola Tesla put up in 1926. So he really, in 1926, he exactly knew how our smartphones will look like. And about these instruments, I want to talk with you now. So we get more and more smartphones over time, not on smartphones, here just devices connected to the internet before they even were smartphones. In 1995, we had 16 million of devices connected to the internet. And now we have over 4 billion. 2020, actually, with a whole population of the world of 7.71 billion, we have 4.48 billion phones, out of which 3.5 billion are smartphones. It's an amazingly huge number, but we still see that over 3 billion people in our world are still not connected to the internet. Yet for us, it's like the most normal thing. So another question for you. Here's again the QR code to scan if you haven't seen yet. And a question for how many hours do you spend on your mobile phone each day? So don't worry, this is all anonymous. And let's see what kind of answers we get there. How many hours do you spend on your mobile phone each day? Now you should, on your smartphone, see the question. And let's see what we do there. We have 12 people, and we have people already answers coming in here. Between 1 and 3 hours, between 3 and 5 hours. Some people less than 1 hour. Okay, that's good. Very healthy app behavior there. Are still some answers coming in. People are still, I see some people still joining on the link. So we see here between 1 and 3 hours is kind of the majority of what people spend on their phone. And with that, you actually, thank you very much for your answers. So, oh, okay, between 3 and 5 coming up, I saw there. So with actually 1 to 3 hours, you are among the average. Yeah, US adults, they spend 2 hours, 55 minutes daily on average on their smartphones. Well, that's like 1 Titanic movie to watch, 2 entire football games, or a 3-hour walk in nature you could do otherwise. Just to bring that in perspective. 2018 was a very special year for mobile web traffic. Why? was the first year ever when mobile website traffic exceeded the website traffic on desktop computers. So from then on, you see 2019, it was a bit lower, but it is about to increase steadily. And it's now at 52%. Good. How did we actually get there to this huge increase? And now smartphone is like the majority of website traffic. It all started in the 70s, but like 1985, you had an example. This is our big phone, yeah, the Motorola Transportable Communicator. It is not a smartphone because you can just make phone calls with it. 1992, actually, IBM Simon was the very first smartphone, and it could send emails. It had apps on it, but this is an example of a technology which was just ahead of its time. There, at this point, they sold 50,000 devices only in the US, and people were not ready for a thing like a smartphone. And so the journey went on with a BlackBerry in 1999 and became very popular among business people. And then the big time of feature phones, especially of Nokia, began in the 2000s. They are also called dumb phones because, yeah, they have like small apps in them, but yeah, they still lack things which make out a smartphone. 2002, the PDA, the Personal Digital Assistant, started. This already has a browser, and you can do a lot of things with it, and has a touch interface, but it has no phone capabilities. And one must say, really, 2007, the iPhone changed a lot because this had really innovative touchscreen-centric design, which should then influence the design of all future smartphones to come. 2008, the Apple App Store launched and allowed third-party apps to be installed, to be created, developed, and installed on iPhones. And also a PhoneGap project is here noteworthy because this is a project which wants to bridge the gap between web and mobile, and I will mention that later in the talk. 2009, the Android version 1.1, which was like a major stable version, was released, and from that time on, Android, yeah, got more and more popular. But what actually makes a smartphone a smartphone? It's really hard to define, but you can actually say that it must have a touchscreen interface, internet access, and downloadable apps. So this is when you look up in a dictionary, they at some point defined it. And with downloadable apps, I mean third-party applications. So this is really important point of it, and that's what I want to focus on in the rest of my talk today. So third-party applications. So what are they? So first-party applications, these are the ones which come with your phone. And for example, the time, the calendar, the Photos app, the camera, and so on, which you see in the first row here. This is a screenshot of my phone. Sorry, a bit embarrassing here to have the high number of unread emails. I will read your emails, just not the spam ones. And you see some third-party applications I have here are, for example, Sleep Cycle to track my sleep, or a Cozier browser, and some other ones. So I want to focus on the third-party applications and how we built them. Because I myself, I'm a mobile app developer. For over 5 years, I'm working with the hybrid development framework React Native. And so in the time I'm working with this framework, I had a few learnings and a few trends I observed, which I want to share with you. But first, I want to start with a question I get asked at least once a week. Andre, hey, we want to build a mobile app. How much will it cost? And my usual answer here is, well, it depends. Like, there are thousands of different factors which play into it, but I can understand why people are really interested in that and want to know, but it's super hard for me to estimate. And as a developer, you usually always underestimate tasks. But let's look at a different question. Is a website optimized for mobile devices good enough? Or do we really have to build a mobile app? This I get asked sometimes, and there I have an answer. So they usually say, yes, you should build a mobile app and not just run your web app in a mobile browser. Mobile apps have a higher engagement rate than mobile optimized website or desktop web viewing. And they have a 100 to 300% higher conversion rate. And for example, take Shopify here. They are mobile in the first quarter of 2019, just to give you an example, but it's very similar over the other quarters. Their mobile accounted for 79% of traffic and 69% of orders. So mobile is really a big one, and the mobile app experience is just much better than just viewing it in a browser. Let's look at another question I get asked at least once a month. Andre, we want to build an app. Should we build the native apps or a hybrid app? I get asked this a lot, and my usual answer here is, well, it depends. So when you actually Google this question, hybrid versus native development, you find 111 million search results. And a lot of these results will give you a clear answer. They will tell you, yes, do native, or definitely go hybrid. And today I want to also talk with you about that and just take a look at what the development of it is, and also look behind the scenes, like what are the underlying workings, how do these different frameworks work under the hood, so that you can make an informed decision. So this brings me to the very first trend I observe, that now hybrid mobile app development is really improving and improved a lot over the last years. So what is it? Just to bring us everyone on the same page. Native development is single platform development. You develop for either Android, for either iOS, which then runs on an Apple phone, or even for a Windows phone. Although, yeah, with this, the market share of them really decreased. And hybrid app development, that is, you build once and in theory then can have an app for all platforms at the same time with just one code base. But when talking about native and hybrid, there is still a third player in the game, and these are the PWAs. So these are, I call them enhanced web apps, and we will look at them. There's also one code base, and you can then run it in all browsers which support PWA features. PWA stands for Progressive Web App. Let's look at them just as a quick definition to know what we're talking about. So native apps, you build multiple times for each target platform in different programming languages, but usually because you build directly for them, you get the best performance. Hybrid apps, you build once and use everywhere. This is kind of the promise of React Native, which they put out, but or in general of the other platforms as well. And there, depending on which framework you use, and you get varying performance. And we will talk about that in a bit. And PWAs, Progressive Web Apps, you also build once and use everywhere. But there you have, I called it, greatly varying performance. And it runs in browsers which support it, and especially iOS mobile browsers are still not yet fully supporting features of Progressive Web Apps, which would make them seem like native apps. But we will look at that in a bit. Good, so how should you actually answer the question of, hey, Andre, we want to build an app. Should we build native or hybrid apps? I told you it depends, but what does it depend on? It depends on user experience, on developer experience, on the team skills you have in your team. It depends on the web development background which exists in your development team, which scope your project has, whether you're only building a mobile app or you're also building a web app, or is it like a system which belongs together. Then target platforms are important, which means, do you only want to target one platform or do you want to target multiple ones? And what is your target market? Is it a certain age group? Is it a certain demographic of people? Is it a certain country? That also influences the decision here. And what's important to know also is that we will see that in a moment, hybrid apps can also even run, you can create desktop apps with them, not only exclusively mobile apps. Let's talk about the user experience, or UX. So what is user experience? And it's important when deciding how to develop, because it depends on which kind of user experience you want to offer your users. And so user experience can be defined as the user's emotions and attitudes about using your product. So the app design plays an essential role here, especially also the ease of use. Of course, the performance, how fast does it start up, how fast are user interactions, and how stable is my app. But also when you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you see that apps, this here is an example of the Trello app. You see on the left-hand side, it's the iOS version. On the right-hand side, the Android version. They look a bit different. Like on Android, you have got this floating button on the lower right, and this plays into the aspect of familiarity. So as an iOS user, Apple user, I'm used to certain UI elements, and as an Android user, I'm used to others. So, but what is clear is what I already mentioned before, that mobile apps offer better user experience than mobile websites. You might know that here all these companies, or let's take a look here, you see that get Facebook for iPhone and browse faster. So Facebook really always wants you to nudge you into getting the mobile app instead of the browser version. And here's a nice comic about that, where, yes, they always really want you to go and get their mobile apps and go out of the browser. So how does it actually work? Let's look a bit under the hood. How does actually just a web app running in a mobile web browser on your phone work? And what can it do? So on the left-hand side, let's go from left to right, you've got your phone. And then you implemented a web app with several screens. And this will just then run inside your browser. And in your browser might be Chrome when you are on an Android device, or Safari if you are on an iOS device, and it will run in there. And then you have access to things like the camera, but it depends really on what your browser allows. And the browser capabilities vary between Safari, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, and the others, and also from version to version, whether you upgrade it or not. What you cannot do is offline support. Like a mobile app, when you open it up, you will be able to do something. It can store some data for you. For just some website, you always need internet connection to get back into it. It cannot also often not store your login data. So on web browsers, you then have cookies, which help you, and you have got new technologies, and we will talk about it in a moment, which can help you to do that. And you will not have an app icon. So it doesn't really feel like a real app. And because it runs in a browser, it really doesn't go directly to the machine code and cannot offer such a nice, fast performance. Okay, let me just put in just saw that my power cable was not plugged in, important. So now let's look at this progressive web apps, the PWAs I talked about, and how they compare to the web app in a mobile browser. So below you see the web app in the mobile browser, and above we see that a progressive web app is living in a mobile browser, or also in a so-called headless browser. So what is that? That's a browser where you don't see the address bar, you don't see the navigation elements in the bottom, and so it really feels more like a real app you are in. But it has still got some limitations to connect to some native APIs like Bluetooth, or also geolocation, GPS data, although it's getting better and better. So progressive web apps are now very well supported by Chrome and by Firefox also. But for example, the iOS mobile browser on Apple phones is gradually adding more progressive web app features. But with a progressive web app, for example, on Android device, you can also have it run offline, and you can create an app icon. And so it feels really more like a normal app. So this is very interesting area because you could just have one code base of a web app and then run it everywhere where a browser is available. Let's take a look at now native versus hybrid and their impact on performance. So this is, again, like you see also the pictures before, I tried to somehow draw things up to explain them a bit better. So sorry about a bit ugly writing here. But so here again, we have our phone. And this time we have a native app, which we developed. And this is transformed into bytecode. So compiled into bytecode, and then further compiled into native machine code. So this is depending on whether you are on iOS or Android. It's then compiled into the respective code, which directly runs on the machine and therefore has high performance and uses native components, like the ones we saw before, the Android floating button, or on iOS, you have like special look and feel components which are directly run. Let's compare that to hybrid development, which I said is like multi-platform development, and you can even target the desktop next to mobile phones. And there are three main approaches here. Flutter is like a new framework which came out. And here we see that we have the phone, then we have the Flutter app, which we developed. This is also compiled into bytecode and compiled into native machine code, but Flutter is not using the native components. It's using own Flutter components. So what Flutter did is they created all the components which you know in Android or iOS from scratch. They created them again, and with that, they have full control over them and can directly run it in native machine code. So you see this looks very similar to the app before, but of course it's not the real native components. So when Apple releases a new update of new components or some new version, the Flutter team has to catch up, or some open source library to recreate these native components for Flutter. Let's look in comparison React Native, which is another very popular hybrid development framework. So from left to right, we've got our phone, we've got our React Native app, which is compiled to bytecode. And then it's a bit more complicated here. We've got two different threads. These are like this rose-colored things with the curls. So we've got a JavaScript thread running in a JavaScript virtual machine, and we've got a native UI thread. So threads are just, you can imagine as some computation, as some mode of computation which runs for itself. And we've got two threads, so you can parallelize things. You can run two different processes at the same time in different threads. And so the native components live in the UI thread, and you see React Native is not creating own React Native components, but they're using the real native components. But because the app is not written natively, but with JavaScript, somehow the JavaScript side of things has to communicate with the native components and tell them where to be displayed and which ones to be displayed and chosen. And this is done via the React Native bridge, which you see here in purple. So in React Native, there's a constant communication going on between the JavaScript thread, which is computing the logic of your program, and the native components. And it's telling them, like, show this one component. And then when for example, when a user tapped on a button, the native side is telling the JavaScript side, hey, the button got pressed, what do I have to do? And then it sends the information back. So this can sometimes, with bigger animations, be a bit more costly or with some heavy lifting tasks. But React Native also, they did a good job in making that also very efficient. But there's still a difference to real native code or to Flutter, which runs native machine code. Let's take a look at a third way of how hybrid apps can be created. And this is what the Ionic framework does with the help of the PhoneGap project, which I mentioned earlier. So here from left to right, we've got the phone and our Ionic app, which we coded. And now you remember the headless browser we had there. So this headless browser is also part of Ionic, like in a progressive web app, but it's wrapped inside a native app container. And this native app container, their PhoneGap gives it the ability to communicate with native features of an app, which like the camera, GPS, Bluetooth, and also offline caching, or also the ability to create an app icon out of it. So here, more is possible than with a progressive web app so far. Progressive web apps are picking up, and now you really have to debate whether Ionic development with such a native app container still makes sense, because this native app container you wrap around it, of course, costs some performance, and the app is running inside a web view, this headless browser, which makes it less performant than when it would be running in native machine code. So this is a big difference. Now we see them all together. You see, they're quite similar when you look at them, but there are differences. And so when you talk about hybrid development, you really have to think about what am I talking there. And most guides you find online are just talking about the high-level things of stuff, which we will talk about in a second, which are also important. But I think this view inside how are the workings and how does that impact performance are also worthwhile and important. But there's always a but. As a note, the biggest impact factor for performance is still how you write your code. When you mess up your code, when you write inefficient code with like a bad runtime and algorithms which don't perform, then no matter which platform you use, you will not be happy with your performance. So let's take a quick look to compare them. So native, as before, that's what I showed you before. Yeah, native, you build multiple times. Hybrid, build once, use everywhere. Also the progressive web app, build once, use everywhere in any browser. Now, I think we can change that to native remaining the same, but hybrid, I will now call build almost once and use everywhere. Why do I say almost once? Because I have to sometimes make tweaks to it so that I address a problem on Android or a specific style on iOS, and I have to tweak it. PWA, you really just build once because you're building for the web and you can use it almost everywhere. But that's also not true. Right now, you cannot use it almost everywhere. But for example, on iOS, it's not, right now, the iOS mobile browser doesn't yet support PWA features. So on Android, you can already have a lot of native features which you can access. And so there's a greatly varying performance here with PWAs, which means depending on what you do, which platform you address, you should be careful right now. But this is definitely a topic for the future. Good. Let's come from the user experience you want to offer, which is tied to the performance you want to deliver, to the developer experience. So user experience we defined as the user's emotions and attitudes about using your product. How can we define the developer experience? It's basically the emotions and attitudes of the people who build your product while they build it. So developer experience is important and got more and more important. And here you see a really eloquent quote of the former Microsoft CEO telling us how important developers are for him. Yes. So, well, the developers among you will probably have seen this video already, but it's really stressing that developers are important. and the experience of them. So when you really build a product, depending on how your emotions, attitudes are towards it, you will do a better job and create a better user experience for the end user. And for example, if you have here seen the screenshot on the right-hand side, a nice error message I get when I develop with React Native, and it looked much more ugly in earlier versions. So it's important to have good tools as a developer. And here, you're next to good tools, you're also looking at, how well are my libraries maintained? Are there good debugging tools available? Is there a nice online community, good documentation, and am I supported in learning? And here you see all the aspects I mentioned before for user experience also play in. And I want developer tools to be nicely designed. And here, of course, now let's look at the difference. So the native side, you have all-in-one, which means usually it's a nice closed developer experience because you do everything in one. And now problems you had before in native development, like that, for example, you had to compile every time and didn't have nice quick reloads. That's also a thing of the past. For example, in iOS with Swift UI, you can now also get hot reloading, which was always a thing which only hybrid app development could do. But here in hybrid development, because there is a lot of open source work in there, which is beautiful, but the tooling was sometimes a pain. Like in React Native, it was really tough at times. And but now there were big improvements done in the recent times. And PWAs, you can just use your known web tools, which are also constantly evolving and developed by the community. So here you have everything in one, and you're developing just once. So it's also a good developer experience. So this is also to consider when choosing hybrid or native. Quick word on team skills. So here you see different programming, like different frameworks, or like on the native side, Android, iOS, or Windows Phone, the target platform. And then in black, you always see the different languages associated with them. And so it really depends on which skills do I have in my team to do the right job. And if I have a team which is strong in JavaScript, I might choose a hybrid framework instead of native work. And in JavaScript, of course, you can again then decide which framework you go for. And the cool thing is when you use that for mobile development, you also increase your skill set for web development at the same time. So here, exactly, it's on native. You can choose when you concerning your team strength, when you have expertise in the team. Hybrid, when you have existing JavaScript knowledge, that's a plus. And for PWA, if you have web dev knowledge, then you should really go and go for that side. But you have to be aware of all the other downsides. Good. So project scope is another factor when deciding on which platform to go for. If you only develop a mobile app, then you might want to go for native to get the best performance. If you have a project laid out where you have a mobile app connected with a content management system and some other, analytics dashboard, then a hybrid framework might be the best choice because you have one code base and can deliver to different platforms. And you learn also with all the work you do, for example, for the mobile app, you then can use the knowledge, for example, which you gain in React and use that for the creation of the content management system and use a smaller team for that, which then reduces the costs of your project. And for a progressive web app, if you can tolerate current deficiencies for iOS users, it might be a cool thing to go for. If you think of the future, then you really have just one code base and you don't have to learn any new tools. So that's from that aspect. Talking about target markets, it's an interesting one. You remember I showed you this kind of overview of how web traffic in 2020 looks like. Majority is mobile. But that's different when you look at different parts of the world. For example, when you look at the African continent, there the majority of web traffic runs on mobile with 60%. And in Europe, it's the opposite. the majority of web traffic is on desktop computers with 56%. And it also changed over time. So here in the top left, you see we're starting at year 2009, and I will now press play and look at this video how the most used mobile phone operating system changed over the last 10 years. And so here we see that after the initial start of the iPhone, iOS was on top, the most used framework on mobile, the most used operating system on mobile. But then now we see here Symbian OS from Nokia. Oh, it already lost the first spot, but it had the first spot for several years because of the Nokia feature phones, which were still used more than smartphones. But now we see from the year 2013 on, smartphones were now used more than feature phones. And Android just offers support for many, many more platforms. And you see that actually Android then already very early overtook iOS. In now the majority of devices in the world run on Android. And we see also Nokia is not seen anymore really. And also the Windows Phone has a marginal percentage in the whole game of mobile phone operating systems. And that is the market share worldwide, also with Windows computers. But let's take a look here. The worldwide market share of mobile operating systems is, as I just showed you, the majority is for Android and iOS like a quarter. But it looks, like in Europe, it looks pretty similar to how it is like in the whole world. But when you look at the distribution, the USA, for example, iOS is used much more than Android. So that's also to consider. When your main market is the US, you might want to go for iOS app, for a native iOS app, and focus on that, and then build an Android app later. But if you develop for India, for example, Android is almost on every phone there, and just 3% of mobile users in India actually have an iPhone. So really have to look at what is my market. Good. That's for the first trend. And for the second trend, I want to look at serverless development and how that empowers front-end developers. Here's a quote which probably every developer knows, which is, there are only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. And that's really true. Cache invalidation is super hard. And when you work with a cloud provider, then at least the cache invalidation is taken care of for you, or most of it. And you only have to deal with the other huge problem of naming things. So how was the traditional way of developing? You would have to develop separate apps for Android and iOS, take care of servers, like things like load balancing, set up databases and hosting. So a lot of things involved. You set up a big team for it. Cloud frameworks now help with a lot of things in this regard, with data storage and synchronization. There, for example, AWS offers automatic code generation of some database schema. Then you had to take care of authentication and email verification yourself. Analytics you can just add with a cloud framework, or things like A/B testing, other backend functionality you want to run, or really scaling with the help of content delivery networks. So there are a lot of different companies, different frameworks out there, and AWS Amplify and Google Firebase are probably the most prominent among them, but there are many, many more. Another trend I observed is, now going a bit deeper in the coding, is the trend of declarative approaches over imperative approaches. So just to get everyone on the same page, what's the difference? So let's take a look. An example, like a mom wants her kid to tidy up its room. An imperative way to demand that would be to say, hey, pick up your toys, then empty the bin, then remove the dust, and finally vacuum the floor. So giving exact instructions of what to do. And a declarative approach, on the other hand, would be like this. So you show the kid a picture and say, hey, here's a picture of how your room looks like when it's clean. So if you want to get it into that state, and I want you to get your room into this state within 30 minutes. So here, you're not explaining exactly how to do it, but you're only telling your kid what you want the room eventually to look like. That's the big difference here. Instead of the how, you just describe the what. And this is extremely powerful. But first, let's look to understand it better, how the imperative way of doing things looks like. So here we've got a tiny app. You see, it's nothing. You can click on show text, and then hello world text will be shown. And on the top right, we will see like in a classic way of writing such a tiny web app, you would see HTML code, which would describe here just the H1, the header. Then you've got the show text button, and you've got the a paragraph where hello world is there, but it has the style of display none, which doesn't show it initially. And looking down then to the jQuery part, you would have a little bit of code which instructs to do something. So when you click onto the button, then you would show the paragraph. So this is really giving instruction exactly when you click, then what do? You show this one thing. How would this look like when you make it declarative? We have the same app, and don't worry about the grayed out code because the main part is here, the one where we describe exactly these fields. We again have a header, we've got a button, and then we've got some code in there with did press button, question mark, hello world, null. So here we've got the ternary operator, which gives us a condition. But we directly see in front of our eyes what will happen. We see exactly what the conditions are, and we describe inside the description of the layout the logic of how it will look like. So we are declaratively here showing that's how it is, because we also add the UI description inside the logic part. To combine that, we see that here in React, when using React, which is a declarative framework, we have everything we need inside the React part, only one file. But when we work with jQuery, which is an imperative framework, we have two files. We have to reference part of the UI, which is here on the lower right-hand side. We have to reference, for example, the button on the left-hand, on the lower left, the button, and we have to reference the P. We don't have to do that in React. We directly describe how it will look like, and in case the button was pressed, we show the hello world text. In case the button was not pressed, we show null. That is nothing. And this is a trend. This declarativeness is a trend where which you have in all the modern, or the most of these modern mobile development frameworks. So it's called show, don't tell. That's kind of the philosophy behind it. And in React Native, you have it. You directly in the code describe how it looks like, and also in the Flutter code, for example. The same also holds for Swift UI. Another trend I want to mention to you is the trend of converging style systems. The web developers among you maybe remember the times back in the day where it was a pain to just center something. And here an example of centering something horizontally. Here on the left and the right are two different ways of doing it. So much code, it's really painful to look at even this code, just to center something horizontally. And then with the Flexbox design system, it is so much easier. So basically, just as one highlighted line here, the justify content center, it does exactly what you do. You say it's center, and you have it centered. And this is now adopted by all major UI frameworks in different ways, but also by the mobile frameworks. So when we look at React Native or Flutter, here not centering something, but evenly spacing three objects. Like evenly spacing objects was so hard still like 5 or 10 years ago. And now with Flexbox, it's much easier. And React Native implemented all of the logic of Flexbox, and Flutter created their own design system, which also implements the logic. You see that here in the highlighted lines, they both have a keyword of space evenly to create the same desired result. Another trend are encapsulated building blocks. So you know also back in web development days, you had global style sheets. One huge style sheet which describes all different parts of an app. So here on the left, you've got, for example, one HTML file, a simple one, and on the right-hand side, you've got the style which refers to it. But, oh my God, you've got a lot of different other HTML files which all are dependent on the style in this big global CSS file. But now, for example, with the React framework, which is used in React Native, it's all simpler because you now have the style. You see that container style. I'm using a special framework here called style components. Don't worry about that. But here we're using this special. We're having the style locally with my component, not globally. So the component is unique and encapsulated, and I can use it wherever I want to. In Flutter, a component is called a widget, but it's the same idea. I've got my text widget here, and I describe the style of my widget, and I describe the style locally. And in Swift UI, I've got modifiers for views. So the text view gets a modifier, get modifiers where I also describe and modify the style locally. So you see it goes across hybrid and native. These are some paradigms and some paradigm shifts and some developments I see irrespective of hybrid or native. Good. These were the different points I wanted to bring up, the trends I saw, and I want to close the whole thing and wrap it up with the idea of technology agnosticism and also framework agnosticism. What do I actually mean by that? That is to not stick to exactly one technology and only learn that, but to understand what is this actually about and be open to learn new technology and new frameworks. Because here's a question I get asked at least once a week. Andre, which framework should I learn? Because I also teach programming to different people, and they all want to learn, like, tell me the one, which is the future framework I have to learn? And this is hard to do. Here, my answer is also usually, it depends. I know that's boring, but it depends on your use case, of course. If you want to build some machine learning, you should go for Python, perhaps. And if you build some front-end application, you go for the JavaScript framework. But if you build mobile apps, you have the options which I laid out before. But there's an answer I can give, and that is, if you want to do like mobile development, then I tell you, pick the one which somehow appeals to you most and focus on understanding the underlying principles. That's really the main point, which I saw, like, as you saw in my talk now, frameworks, irrespective of hybrid or native, are moving into the similar directions. The underlying principles are more important than framework details. DevOps can be outsourced, as we saw, to cloud providers by going serverless. But you, however, have to understand the big picture. That's more important than syntax details. And for me personally, React was a wonderful journey because it helped me to rethink best practices, and some third-party libraries taught me many different concepts. All right. I thank you for your attention, and I hope you learned something here and hope got a better idea of what the current state and the future of mobile app development is. And to sum up the whole thing, I want you to now go back into the quiz and let us take a quick look at, what do you think of mobile development right now? So let's continue here. And so which words would you now associate with a mobile app? So please get back into that. I show you the QR code again. So I'm now excited to see, are there some other words you might now associate with a mobile app or with the term of mobile app? And so I want to see your answers, and please scan the QR code. And right after that, we have a small quiz where I will ask you a few questions about, there are already some words coming up. And if you have any questions, then please also ask them here inside the chat, and I will be happy to answer them for you. And also, there's my Twitter handle again. So please just post something on Twitter and add me or write me a direct message or search for Andre Kovac on LinkedIn. I'm happy to reply to your questions. Good, so let's take a look. There's now some words coming in. Native is now a new word. React, yeah, flexible, hybrid, declarative, a nice word. Okay, so some more words coming in here. Don't be shy. You can still go to the link ahaslides.com/mobile-apps if you want to join the quiz. So just put that into your mobile app browser. Okay. Now let's start the quiz. So please, you should now see a screen on your phone where it asks you to put in your name. Like, I'm also joining the quiz. And so you can now put in your name or a handle, and let's see how much you remembered from the talk. And let's see whether some other people want to join. We have 10 people, 11, 12. And so just put in your name, and then we will start the quiz. Hello, nice to see you, Eva. Hi, Marta. Hi, Adik. Hi, Carolina. Nice to see you. B, ooh, a ghost, also part of the whole thing. So Lukasz is there as well. I think I have to start the quiz in a second because we run out of total time. Okay, Anna, nice to meet you. Okay, so I'll start the quiz in 5 seconds. So quickly join. 5, 4, Pavel, hello. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now I start the quiz. So 5 quick questions for you, and the faster you reply, the more points you get. So let's get it on. The first question: what makes a smartphone a smartphone? You can have pick multiple answers here. 3, 2, 1. Time's up. What have we got here? Oh, okay. Different answers. Let's see what we have. Oh, Maciek was the fastest so far. Let's continue. Question 2. This question is about why was 2018 a special year? You've got 15 seconds to reply. 3 different possible answers. Only one is correct. Let's see. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Time's up. Okay. There we have 7 people that put in the right answer. One Liverpool won the Champions League, but what have we got there? Okay, we've got a new leader here, Lukasz. Okay. So, question number 3. Where does a progressive web app, PWA, run? Ready? Here are the different answers: native app container, compiled to native machine code, or browser. What is the right answer here? Where does a progressive web app run? The faster you are, the more points you can get. Time's up. Oops. Did we look? Oops. Sorry about that. I skipped the answers for that. Oh, sorry. Oops. Okay, sorry. I didn't show. I went back, and then you already answered you answered this question already. So let's just take a look at what the answers were. And here, browser. Most of you had that answered correctly. So let's take a look. Now we have Pavel as a new leader here. Let's have the 4th question.